So welcome to this session entitled Embracing Unity, Advancing Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. This particular session is in remembrance or in honor of our 30th anniversary. Now that OMERAC is 30 years old, it's about time we started to address some of the infrastructure issues that actually make us an organization. And since this meeting has been targeted to be dealing with a lot of these particular issues, we thought it was absolutely appropriate that we actually do this session today. It is both a presentation as well as a self-directed at the table breakout session to do some exercises. And this is really important in the 21st century. And again, as we enter into our next 30 years, addressing these particular issues is very important. I'm incredibly honored to be able to introduce our speaker, who's going to lead us in this this next hour and a half, next 90 minutes. Grace Wright has graciously appeared to come and speak with us and share with us today in the midst of having travel up the wazoo everywhere, and we are incredibly grateful for this. She is a rheumatologist in New York and has really maintained an enormous impact on the rheumatology community. She's head of the Women in Rheumatology group, and that has really taken off and is a very important component of the groups that are make up our society and professional work. And hopefully we'll be able to join those groups in the context of the kind of work that we do. So Grace, please come on up. And please welcome her. Clicker.
Thank you. So my first obstacle is I have to stand still because I don't have a lav on. I'm one of those walking speakers. So I'm just going to walk you through some of my ideas about what's important in this new movement that we have, which is unity, embracing unity, really thinking through equity, diversity, and inclusivity, and really what does that mean? And how do we operationalize that? How do we make that something that's real for us? So I thought I'd start off by saying, well, who is OMERACT? That's why we're here. So this is a global volunteer-driven, not-for-profit organization committed to improving outcomes for patients with autoimmune and musculoskeletal diseases through advancing the design and quality of clinical studies. Sounds really good, and it's really important that we do this. But then the second thing is, when we think about what that actually is, we're supporting the development of core outcome sets, identifying patient and disease-relevant areas to be measured, or the domains, and the corresponding measurement instruments for use in clinical trials, including those for regulatory approval of new treatments. So what OMERACT does is incredibly impactful and incredibly important. So my next question is the end product biased? Is it genderized? Is it racialized? Is it minoritized? How did we include these, and who did we include in creating these diverse outcome sets? Are the definitions that we have of race, ethnicity, ancestry inclusive and respectful? And I don't stand here in judgment. I stand here as a member of the pack that needs to think through this. We were in Brazil just 48 hours ago, and we're collecting some data on people, and the young woman looks at me and says, I'm mestizo. What is Hispanic? I am none of these. Because the systems that we were using were based on a US-based measure of how we measure ethnicity and race, and so we excluded an entire continent because we don't have those definitions. So it's very easy to have this happen and very easy to have people feel disrespected as a result. And we'll see that once disrespect enters the room, shame, humiliation, a bunch of other things exit, right? Do our references perpetuate colonialism? Why do we toggle on Hispanic, non-Hispanic, Black or white, non-Hispanic? What exactly are we referring to? And then ultimately, what impact does this have on the four important Ps, our persons, our providers, our patients, and our pupils? So everything that we do and how we do it has a long-lasting impact, even though we're creating core sets and we're identifying domains, but how we do that then matters, right? Now, when we think about bias, as I'm a cook, I'm a gardener, so I talk in those terms. We know the impact of the marinade. What you put in that sauce, that you marinate that meat or fish or vegetable in, matters. What you include and what you exclude matters. Changes flavor, texture, presentation. And that, to me, is what bias is. We're all born into a family, a structure, a society, a community, and then we are marinated in the things that that society and that social structure have to offer. It becomes us, and then we perpetuate by becoming more of this. So when we think about bias, it can be conscious, which is explicit, or unconscious, implicit, and it's an attitude or stereotype that affects an individual's understanding, treatment, and action towards people from specific groups. So this sort of feels very intellectual. I'm going to switch this, and I want us all to say out loud, but instead of putting an individual's, we're going to put a two-letter word, my. So please, speak along with me. Bias is a conscious, explicit, or unconscious, implicit attitudes or stereotypes that affect my understanding, treatment, and actions towards people from specific groups. That's how powerful that is. Me, the individual, impacting. Structural bias now refers to the factors that determine the environments in which we live, we work, we play, we sort of live our lives, and it's enacted through policies and enforcement on people of, you fill in that blank, that in turn then reinforce discriminatory beliefs, values, and distribution of resources. So we come back and say, well, we're somebody, we do clinical trial stuff. How does that affect us? That's the structural bias. Because if we codify that in the way we design our core sets and our domains and our measures, then we perpetuate and reinforce discriminatory beliefs. We did a session on lupus and disparities. And the data said, a very simple statement, that lupus patients who are Black go to the emergency room more frequently. And it was sort of thought to mean, well, they just don't know better. They don't know to go to the rheumatologist. They don't know to go to their primary care provider. When in fact, the problem was there was no continuity of care rheumatologist or primary care provider available because the healthcare system that they were in did not allow for that. So we can look at data and we can codify things differently and then dehumanize and sort of create this perpetuation of a belief system against people. So social inequities is that product that is created when we have perpetuated this unintentionally, no harm intended, and social inequities we'll see is disparities in outcomes perpetuated by systemic bias that assigns values and opportunities based on race and ethnicity, or based on gender, or based on disability, or based on age, or based on height and weight, right? And prevents those communities from having equal opportunities, whether it is to be studied in a clinical trial, whether it is to have resources allocated appropriately. And we all lived through this with the COVID-19 pandemic, which sort of really sort of brought that to the forefront. And this includes, I included structural, racial, and gender bias as three of the key ones, but it includes all kinds of bias. So let's focus a little bit on sexism and gender bias. I thought this was sort of a very cute exercise for us to think through. And this is data now coming from 2022. Oh, that's right, that was just last year. We haven't evolved that much yet, right? So this is according to the UN, 90% of men and women have some kind of gender bias against women. And again, pointing out that gender bias here is favoring one gender over another. That can be explicit or it can be implicit. Now, how did we see this? This is a very interesting search that was done on Yahoo and Google. I'm just gonna, well, I have two options. I can put on my glasses so I can actually see. My goodness, sometimes I forget I have them. So here it is, the autocomplete truth about men. So you put in the search term, men should be masculine, be strong, always pray, be what they seem, have a big nose. Where does that come from? And wear pink. Does anybody in the room have on pink? Yes, you are what a man should be. Men should not wear skinny jeans. Everybody with skinny jeans on, stand up. Should not wear skinny jeans, should not cry, should not show emotion, should not take paternity leave, should not have long hair, God forbid, and should not divorce. Men need women, but they need space. They need to be masculine, they need to be tough, they need to provide, and they need more calories than women, for God's sake. This is what just fell out. What about women? Women should stay in the kitchen, be housewives, be mothers, go out and work, bail out in combat. So to make this personal, I'm a junior attending. I'm at this point an assistant professor of medicine, and I'm surrounded in the faculty room with a cardiologist, a pulmonary intensivist, an ophthalmologist, me the rheumatologist, and a general surgeon, happen to all be women. We just happened to walk in to put some stuff down, and one of our senior attendings walks in and he says, "You should all go back to the kitchen." And I said, "I know how to cook, do you? You're in a room of women. This is really kind of, putting your life at risk." But this was actually said to us, and I'm probably older than I want to acknowledge, but I'm not that old, right? So women should stay in the kitchen, be housewives, be mothers, go out and work, but you should be allowed in combat. Okay, we're not even going to talk about that. Women should not be in combat, okay? They should not be in politics. They should not vote. They should not be leaders. They should not breastfeed in public. And they should not be paid equally. This is 2022. Women need saving. I have two brothers. I was their savior. Women need a man, women need protection, women need attention, women need to belong, and women need equal pay. So this is what we see dropping out of men and women fulfilling, just a Google Yahoo search, and this is just data mining pulling this up. This is 2022, okay? So bias still exists in terms of what we think. So we say, and this is now a very famous picture of me with my hands in the air in exasperation saying, "Bias be gone." Because we've had it, and we know that it's not good, and we want to remove unwanted bias. So what we have done is we have said that if we just fix the balance, gender balance means you hire more women, you put more people of color, you get more disabled people in, you get more pregnant women in. If you create balance, then you decrease bias. But simply adding women to the workplace does not change organizational structures and systems that benefit men over more than women. It does not change the structures that benefit majority versus minoritized populations, abled versus disabled, cisgender versus non-cisgender. Structure is what changes that, and structure is what we codify when we create core outcome sets and domains and how we ask questions, right? So always coming back to why does this matter? So let's sort of jump forward to racism, vicarious racism, and microaggression, because this, I think, becomes a very important part of what we think about. But I want us to also include in this the idea of cultural competence, cultural inquisitiveness, cultural humility. You can put any adjective after culture, any verb. It's the ability to collaborate effectually with individuals from different cultures. What does that mean? So we can think, well, culture means you're Irish, you're French, you're whatever. I'm in a room again. I always love to give examples of myself. I can humiliate myself with glee. That's okay. I'm in a room of about 500 people, and I spot two other Black Jamaican women. Yes, they're both incredible athletes. My athleticism is in my cranium. Don't ask me to run, okay? She loves ice hockey. She's a basketball nerd. She loves jazz music. She loves classical music. All three of us born in the same island, roughly the same age, plus or minus 6 years, culturally completely different. So the problem is that we assign culture based on belief systems that we have about what that person looks like, where they come from, and what they should be engaging in. So cultural competence is really something to explore when we want to talk about diversity and inclusivity. But as we go further, Let us now think through how that then segues into racism. So racism is an important part, we know this, of our social determinants and drives inequities. And we can think about this in terms of this blossoming onion, where there's that intrapersonal or internalized racism. So the question is, if I'm stranded on a desert island, if I'm stranded out, there's no other human being around, can I still be racist? There is intrapersonal belief systems that have nothing to do with who's around. And those are the things that marinated in us that we have no knowledge or even placed there in the beginning. Then we have interpersonal, which is what we all think of as racism. It's my action towards you. It's discrimination and biases between individuals, whether it's family, friends, social networks, through words and actions. Then there's institutional. And institutional comes in and says that there are discriminatory policies and practices within organizations and groups. And it goes up another level to community, which is discrimination and bias is shown between organizations and institutions. You're not as good as me. I'm from Boston, you're from New York. I'm from, right? We've all played or heard that game played. And then there is a systemic or structural, which is ongoing inequities that have been codified. They're maintained by society through national, state, and local policies. So we can see how, the health system, healthcare is just part of this greater large community, but there are many ways in which, and I'm using racism as a very easy way to identify this, but you can put anything else into that ism. We can codify that on all of these levels. Belief systems that start with me, the individual, go out to me, the group, and go up to me, the law of the land. Racial bias, however, is the conscious or unconscious attitudes or stereotypes that affect an individual's understanding, treatment, and actions towards people from specific groups. So I love this, well, I do actually love this movie, but I love the fact that there are people there who have colors, shapes, looks, sizes, culturally different, racially different. You're not even sure sort of who and what they are. But this is the idea that we look at this and just say, oh, these are a really great group of people who have great diversity and have much to offer, not, my God, who wants purple black skin? I happen to think purple is a great color, but that's the problem, is understanding how that sort of gut visceral response to seeing something that is other, whether it's cultural, color, race, comes into play. Now, this racism, this structure, is a root cause of health inequities because we go from causality to systems to outcomes. When we start off with these policies, we go through sort of codifying it into systemic and systematic issues, and then the outcomes that we end up with are the things that people experience, right? Inequities in physical and psychological health, impaired quality of life, and when those people are patients, then their health outcomes are directly impacted as well. Now, vicarious racism, when I stumbled into this, it was sort of this sort of interesting thing because we were all experiencing it without knowing what it was. So it's secondhand exposure to racism, much like secondhand exposure to smoke. So vicarious racism is a secondhand exposure to racial discrimination and or prejudice directed at another individual. I am not the target, it is you. Exposure is irrespective of the race of the indirect target, as the unintended victim may relate to the direct target on the basis of ethnicity, age, gender, geographic proximity, love of rugby, love of soccer, love of piano, nationality, or any other characteristic. So, we see this with our continuous stream of cable news and images and TikToks and YouTube videos and all of this stuff, right, that comes at us. And we wonder why there is this onslaught on mental health. But vicarious racism is real, and the microaggressions that can come are also real. And it includes whether you witness that event in person or online, right, or on television, whether you read about it, and this has been studied, the social scientists know this better than even I do, reading about it, witnessing it, or hearing about it. So when we talk about it, see it, all of the senses become involved. We also then sort of are the recipients of that vicarious racism, and it has an impact on us. Microaggressions, and this is quoting now Daryl W. Sue, the everyday slights, indignities, put-downs, and insults that people of color, women, LGBTQ plus populations, or those who are marginalized experience in their day-to-day interactions with people. So this happens all the time. And here is the scary part, is that it's closely tied to biases. It happens casually, frequently, and often without any harm intended, and often sort of comes off as a compliment or a joke, but it contains a hidden insult about a group of people. And although it's a seemingly small and innocent offense, it can take a psychological toll on the mental health of the recipient. I'll show you some examples to show that we've all probably at some point stepped into that situation. So here are a couple of examples of racial and ethnic microaggressions, and I'll share personally some of them that I have experienced over the course of my career. Where are you from? You speak really good English. And I said, I speak the Queen's English. You speak? Oh, that's right, American. Because, you know, I'm a really tough girl. But just that statement, what does it imply? And here we're looking at Asian Americans and Latinx Americans are assumed to be foreign-born. There's an assumption that was made. And the impact to the person receiving that is, you're not an American, you're a foreigner. You're not French because your accent isn't quite right. You're not really from, right? So that's how that microaggression goes across. Or you can be told you're a credit to your race. You're so articulate. The number of times I have been told I'm so articulate, I'm like, you really need to go back to school and learn how to speak. Because people of color are generally not as intelligent as white people. It is unusual for someone who looks like you to sound like you. These are things that have been said to many, 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 many of us. Or it's, when I look at you, I don't see color. America's a melting pot. All lives matter. There's only one race, a human race. Because since race doesn't have an effect on me, I can't see why it has an effect on you, why we can't all get along. So denying that person's identity and their experiences really just simply says, you must assimilate into a dominant culture. So we can't codify race by just removing race. We can't codify color by just removing color, because there are things that become part of an individual's identity because of all of those things that they have lived throughout their lives and experienced. And we lose the ability to capture the rich data that can come along with understanding how that then relates to that patient's report on their health status, that patient's understanding of pain, that patient's understanding of fatigue, or that patient's experience of their disease. So you can't remove it to then say, well, it doesn't matter, because in fact it does. A couple of other microaggressions here. Don't you want to have a family? Have you ever had real sex? So who's the man in the relationship? And this goes on. And you know, patients came in and they told me that these things were said to them at the front desk. They're coming to a health center for care, and this is a sort of stuff, right? Because it's part of the system of care. Or you're going to stay home with the kids, right? Or you can't be in this clinical trial because you have kids to take care of, right? Or you can't take this medicine because don't you want to have kids in the future? There are all of these ways in which we codify, this is your role, and that's all that you're capable of. Or we tell them that they're not good enough, they're not being listened to, they're not being valued. And so it's really easy to have these microaggressions occur, and they occur within the communication that we give forth. So what puts people at risk for experiencing bias? Racially and ethnically underrepresented or disadvantaged. So if you're non-white race, non-English speaking, this is what the data tells us, not my opinion, low socioeconomic status. From a sexuality and gender perspective, if you're non-heterosexual, female gender, or non-cisgender identity, you're much more likely to experience bias. And the medical challenges that put you at risk for bias, being disabled, which many patients in some capacity may experience, being obese, having mental illness, even if we say depression and anxiety is mental illness, right? People with HIV and a stigmatizing disease, in fact, substance use disorders, and advanced age. So ageism becomes part of the medical challenge. And the bias that we have as healthcare providers can then perpetuate through to disparities in health, as you see here, because, the way that we communicate, our body language, our verbal cues, the way that we ask the question, the way that we word the question that we put in that survey that the patient fills out can affect and impact, number one, what they answer, but how they feel. And that becomes a thing that they take away that we don't have documented anywhere, but they carry that with them. The diagnostic and treatment decisions, what we offer, how we view their ability to be adherent, and then ultimately the bias that follows through into the patient health, all sort of codified because of the various things that we have as members of the healthcare system. So I just ask us all to go through the exercise in quiet, to think about any incidences of microaggressions that you have yourself encountered, and to think of microaggressions that others may have encountered because of you. Vicarious racism examples. Did it affect you? Was there an emotional baggage that kind of went with it? And did it then change the way you related to the next person that you saw? And consider this as the experiences of colleagues within a working group, within a network, within an organization, charged to create things that are fair and equal to all people. So what is EDI? Equity, diversity, inclusivity. We should make a song about this, right? We're hearing this term, and so I've shown equity in the scales of justice, the diversity with the people, and the inclusivity with the home that we want to create. And in fact, it's about creating spaces and creating cultures. So equity, diversity, inclusivity is an approach. It's not a thought. It's an approach to promoting fairness and equity within an organization, to creating an environment where everyone is valued and respected regardless of their background, identity, or experience. And it's about creating a culture that values diversity, promotes equity, and fosters inclusivity. So when we think of the definition strictly, equity is simply the fair treatment of individuals, considering the unique challenges. It's not saying that we're all the same, because we're not. Considering the unique challenges and barriers they may face due to their background or identity. Diversity is a range of differences, not just the 2 or 3 toggle switches that we have that exist among individuals, which include differences in ancestry, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, age, ability, religion, and socioeconomic status. And then inclusivity says, I create an environment where everyone walks in and feels welcome and valued regardless of their cultural, ancestral, and gender differences, just to give a sense of a couple of the ways that we can toggle. The Surgeon General actually framed this quite nicely for the workplace, mental health and well-being, and put this on 5 core domains with 2 anchors per domain. And as we see, protection from harm, safety and security, opportunity for growth, learning and accomplishment, mattering at work, dignity and meaning, connection and community, social support and belonging, and then work-life harmony, autonomy, and flexibility. Those are the 5 things that were sort of codified to say, if we want to have workplace mental health and well-being, then these are some of the things that we need to anchor and ground in for everything that we create and then everything that we do. And it's not saying it's easy, but these are some of the things that we can work around and work towards. So how do you operationalize this? DEI with the A now adds in the idea of accessibility. So in inclusive workplace cultures, all workers, including those from diverse backgrounds, whether they are high or low socioeconomic, feel safe to be authentic and express their feelings. I know personally, as a Black woman of color, the idea of walking in with natural hair was considered absolutely appalling. I was told once, because I had a Grace Jones haircut back in the day when hair grew like weeds, you cut it, it came back the next day, that I was a traitor to the Black race because I had a hairstyle that looked a little bit too something or other. I was a resident in training at that time. So these things get said in the back corners because, people have ideas and express them. So did I feel safe to be authentic and express my feelings and wear my hair or just be who I am? Probably not. It depends on a culture of trust, where all coworkers welcome and value each other's unique perspectives, where we don't assume that mine, by definition, is better than yours. When we celebrate diversity as a source of strength, where workers experience less stress and anxiety as bias then becomes, and prejudice becomes less tolerated. And we prioritize these issues and create relevant policies and programs that go all the way up to a leadership that is inclusive and representative of the people that are being led, where all team members feel valued and where they have a voice. So remember, we go back to the marination of the spices. Attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions in an unconscious manner that are activated without our consent or knowledge. It's an involuntary response, and can be either positive or negative. And we're all susceptible. There's no one of us who does not experience implicit bias. It's how we are created. Sheryl Sandberg said it very well. Bias runs deeply in all of us. We need to accept it, acknowledge it, and then correct it. Just get over that. It's there. What do we do next? Within our organizations, there are a variety of barriers that we can now sort of take steps towards correcting, whether they're explicit or implicit, systemic bias, diversity hiring strategies coming into place, removing power imbalances, understanding that privilege means that you have access to things in an automated way that others may not. Cross-cultural education and training, thinking about language as a barrier, not just as an inclusion. So organizations can support these participatory initiatives, leverage the knowledge and experiences of diverse and representative group of members. And this is a really diverse group. Let's leverage that and be inclusive in the development of every single thing that we do as we create equity. Everybody will have a chance to join the equity group after this. So implicit bias training can make individuals aware of unintentional involvement. I didn't realize I was doing that, but now I know. In perpetuating discrimination and inequity, it can make individuals aware of unrecognized advantages that are enjoyed as a member of certain groups. That's essentially what privilege is. It can encourage individuals to confront personal biases and unearned privilege, and it can teach these strategies to reduce discrimination in thoughts and practices. But here is the kick. Despite this success in changing my individual level of beliefs and actions, implicit bias training is pretty much ineffective in diminishing institutional inequities because it does not address the institution. And the problem is that when we focus on implicit bias alone, which is what we hear a lot of, my implicit bias, I have to be aware of this, I have to correct it, I have to acknowledge this, it sort of removes the idea that the structure has to be changed, that we're ignoring the role of structure in framing the beliefs and actions of individuals, and the rules and regulations, the policies that we codify that then perpetuate without us even being present. They govern the institutions that we create. So the individual alone is insufficient to drive change. Necessary, but insufficient. This was just published last month, and I found it really interesting because we're using so much big data, we're sort of computerizing everything, and the problem here was automated bias can creep in and be another source of bias, and this is when patterns fail. And what they actually found here was that using these various automated facial recognition algorithms, it couldn't identify people of different skin tones. I mean, big data in, big data out, right? Whatever you feed in, that's what you get out. It favored slim and younger faces. It was biased against anybody in a military uniform. It didn't like gray hair. And if you were in a wheelchair, you were magically erased. This was the system that was created. And so they realized that everyone says we care about reducing bias, but the default approach was don't look, don't see, and definitely don't find. So once you create this and you say, well, I've done this thing that's going to remove it, what they did was they codified it. So we have to be very careful and intentional about how we do this because we can actually make the issue much worse. This was just not even 30 days ago. So how do we address this? Well, first we measure it. We collect the data, and we're doing some of that here today. We identify our own biases. We challenge our biases. We interrupt the usual. We become very uncomfortable with being comfortable. We have to be curious, and we have to think about all the ways in which microaggressions can creep in interpersonal relationships, in interinstitutional relationships, and really be very intentional about educating around that. So in closing, we acknowledge it, publicly acknowledge that. It's like confession. You measure it, get the data. What are we doing? What do we have? How do our measures measure up when we think through these different sets of lenses? You correct it, and that can be done, but we have to be careful that when we correct, we codify correctly. We don't perpetuate bias. And then we provide education and awareness so that we're all continuously and constantly aware of the various traps and tricks that we can fall prey to. And understand that there is the bystander that can intervene and be open to having somebody say, you know, that really wasn't great what you just said. How do you think that made her feel? How do you think that made him feel? Do you think that patient really walked out of here feeling better about themselves? Maybe we need to think about how we ask that question differently. If we hear it, we see it, we should do something about it. We raise awareness that way. And then we can, at the end of the day, establish policies that are equitable, that will drive towards this culture of inclusivity and equity where everyone feels valued as an organization that can then set standards and work and collaborate with others to do this. So, you know, and then ultimately we have to make sure that we hold ourselves accountable to do what we said we were going to do. And so this is part of that path towards leading that. So OMERACT is committed to creating a culture that values diversity, promotes equity, and fosters inclusivity. So the question then is, what are our next steps? And to do that, I'm going to invite Grayson to the podium. Let me just read what I wrote here about Grayson. So Grayson Schultz is a nerd, a writer. I'm just writing the way he describes himself. Queer, trans, and disabled activist, a researcher in healthcare administration focused on patient engagement, navigation, and advocacy. He works to improve awareness of covered spots while pushing us all to make the world a better place through conversations, research, and equity work. He can usually be found, except for today, embodying the spirit of an old man while yelling at people on the internet. And if he's not doing that, he might be cooking up a storm, remodeling his first home, writing for the U.S. Pain Foundation, or hiking with his partner, McRaven, and their dogs, Hank and Dean. So with that, I welcome Grayson to the stage. Thank you.
And how do I follow that? Okay. So now we're going to do some activities, right? We've learned all this great information from Grace, and it's time to like get some juices flowing, get moving, right? First of all, wanted to do a little map and show where we're all from. As you can see, there are some areas that are pretty saturated with people in the room, right? The U.S. is pretty heavily represented. Europe's pretty heavily represented. We've got some people from Canada, Australia, some other spots. Notice which areas we're missing people from. And let's just sit with that for a second. We're going to do the first of two activities. This is an identity wheel. And first, I kind of want to talk a little bit about background. So when we're talking about our own identities, you know, our genders, our race and ethnicity, our sexual orientation, etc., we're talking about our identities in this pink circle here, and I know this is a little fuzzy. When I made this graphic, I did not make it big enough. But these are all things that make us who we are, right? The languages we speak, where we live, our disability status, all these other things. And in these circles around our pink circle representing ourselves, we can see the different systems of oppression that are working on us and through us as we interact with other people. So we see racism, we see ageism, we see ableism, we see ethnocentrism, we see fatmisia or fat phobia, right? Sizeism would be another good example. And then we see some of the systems themselves, the education system, capitalism, white supremacy, and the way that those act on and through us. These can all be encompassed under the title Kyriarchy, which is kind of like the big giant title of this is oppression. And if we look at this second circle, we can see towards the middle, we see the identities that hold more power, right? So people who are proficient and native speakers of English probably are having an easier time navigating spaces in the conference than folks who might have a different language as their primary language. People who have a higher income probably have an easier time attending a conference. People who have, people whose sex is male or whose gender is a cisgender man are going to have an easier time navigating things than women or people who are trans and non-binary or people who are intersex. So with all of that said, what we're going to do is on your tables, you can find a couple of sheets. On the back, there's some more information written out about what the identities could be, just to give you some ideas, but please don't feel limited by those. And on the front, you'll see this fun wheel. And what this wheel is just a nice way to look at your own identities. Sometimes we don't recognize the biases we hold until we see our identities and can understand the way that they work with us in the world, right? So as an example, we have things on here like your race, your ethnicity, your heritage, your culture, your citizenship and immigration status, your housing status, your body type. Don't feel like you have to fill all of them in, but we're going to take 5 minutes for folks to work on them together. And in the interest of transparency, and for an example, these are some of my answers, right? So I am a US citizen. I was born in the US. I live in Ohio. I'm literate and I have a master's degree. I'm monogamous. Sorry, Jordy. And I'm engaged. I'm white with a primarily UK-based and European-based ancestry. I'm a transgender man. I am queer. I'm 35. I'm spiritual but not religious. I have specific conditions. I live in the US, and I speak a couple languages. And the ways that I move through the world, all of these things impact, and they impact the way that I interact with other people. So we're just going to take like 5 minutes, and I'll come back and ping everybody, when we're about 30 seconds away, to just fill those out at your table. And again, fill out what you are comfortable with, but also embrace discomfort. Oh my God, okay. Also embrace discomfort if you feel good about going there. Okay, cool. So now what we're gonna do is what maybe a lot of you are already doing. Share out at your table. We're gonna take, 5-10 minutes here. Share out at your table if there were any things that on that worksheet popped up for you that you were really surprised about, or if there were things that weren't on that worksheet that you wish were, like left-handedness versus right-handedness, something like that. And just take a couple minutes to discuss. Okay, everybody. Let's slow down our conversation. Come back to the podium. I don't know. I'd be interested to hear, or just by a show of hands, did anybody find an identity that they hold that they didn't realize they held before? Or maybe a bias that you didn't realize you held before? That could be something like wanting to put average for your body type, or normal for something when there is a better term to explain that? No? Okay. I know that's not true, but that's okay. I was mingling. All right. So now we're going to play a different game, maybe a slightly less fun game. Now that you're all so used to talking with each other, I want you to choose someone at your table to kind of be a note taker here. They're also going to be a reporter, so reporting out at least one of the things you discuss. I want you guys to talk about taking into account barriers. What could OMERACT do to promote inclusivity within our organization? I'm going to give you guys about 15 minutes to talk, write down ideas, and then when we do a report out, I just want one idea from each group. And I'll give more instructions then, but after you share your one idea, you'll go and hand over your notes to our scribe over there so that they can incorporate that into the rest of the poster, which is pretty cool. So choose a note taker and take about 15 minutes to discuss how to incorporate more inclusivity into OMERACT. Okay, I'm interrupting your conversation again. Who is ready to report out on your one idea? I heard a thought that maybe table number 3 was ready. Okay. Oh my God. I cannot see the numbers. Table number 12 is ready. 14 is ready. All right. We're going to have 3 start, and then we'll go 12 and 13, and I'll check back in a minute. So if each reporter could come up, share your idea, that would be great. Oh, are you reporting?
So I migrated to table 3. I won't tell you where I came from. So our one idea was that looking at that map in which we had huge swaths of the world that were not represented, that we could start to do intentional recruitment, meaning invitations, leveraging our personal relationships. So for instance, I said Africa is empty, Middle East is, empty. Who do we know that if I ask would come? Because we have a young man here who came because he was asked to come by someone that he works with and knows, so that we can use the power of relationships so that we can fill in those empty holes and probably have a more representative sample of rheumatologists, especially if we then move it closer to that neck of the woods, so that it's an easier lift to come. We know that in some regions it's really hard because you're so understaffed that you can't give up the time to actually leave patient care to come. But I think if we leverage relationships and who asks and how that person asks sometimes makes all the difference in the world, so that we can fill in those gaps. Southeast Asia was empty, Africa was empty, Middle East was empty. We can change that.
Hi, I'm from Group 12. My name is Elfrida Sabada. I'm from Birmingham. Apologize for my voice. So we thought about creating a safe environment. And how about that, yeah? Okay, fantastic. So we thought about increasing the safe space and probably the comfortable space for everybody. So, for example, accessibility for our patient research partners. Due to some physical limitation, this is not the most accessible building in terms of moving from place to place or within the bedroom, in terms of the beds and the access to bathroom. Secondly, I need to take a breath, because people with lung disability would have problem breathing in this thin air. So those would sort of reduce the productivity, particularly from the cognitive point of view. And second thing is the word culture, or rather the food and drink culture. So we might notice that the availability for halal food or vegan food is not as much, or well, there's no halal food at all. And that is because they said that they can't cater it after I ordered it 6 months ago. And as a result, certain participants will have less protein intake, and it's not nice not being able to eat as what you would like to eat healthily. And finally, about the free-flowing wine, which is fantastic for the majority. However, each time I go to the bar, the lovely bar lady will just like, sorry, we don't have anything. And then she has to go find some form of orange juice somewhere at a different counter every single time. Everyone's enjoying their wine. So these are really small things, but they're really important because there are lots of people who don't drink wine. And I think it's really important to have at the back of the mind when we cater for such a diverse population like Umrat. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Melissa from the CNO work group. All right. Ooh, sorry. That was too close. Okay. I'm Melissa. I'm from the CNO work group. So we have a long list. I will not go through all of it because we're just doing kind of target ones. But I think the overarching theme is you'll see, we want to actively recruit more participants from the, countries and that were not representative on that map. And in doing so, we had kind of a more technical suggestion for the actual methods, the literature review and scoping review and the qualitative methods. We talked about including non-English speaking focus groups, discussion boards, and also like non-English literature as well, peer-reviewed articles, because it's hard. A lot of us are English speaking, so kind of finding ways to promote that either through, if we can recruit more participants from other countries where their languages are not, necessarily primarily English, and they can translate those for us or lead those discussion boards or focus groups for us. So that was one of the suggestions that we had.
Hello there, can you hear me? Hello, I'm Caitlin. I'm reporting from table number 1. We had a lot of suggestions, but the one I'll talk about builds on the first about purposefully welcoming participants from the countries and continents where we have quite low representation, but it seems like a lot of those areas are, countries that have lower income, and so maybe there needs to be some financial support to help recruit people from, places like Africa and Asia. Some sort of, subsidized rate or something to attend if that is one of the barriers to why they're not already part of our group. Thanks.
Nidhi Goel reporting for table 14. I'm going to speak fast so I can mention more than one item. Expense was already mentioned, so I'm not going to talk about that. I think we need to do, our group talked about doing a better job of both the emerging leaders, but also ensuring the fellows are representative and that the fellows keep coming back and that somehow we engage them to come back. The other thing we noted, there were many people of color at our table, is that there are no people of color on the working group for the DEI working group. And whereas that's not the only item that you were listed as a speaker, but maybe you are, and that would be great. But one element that helps recruit people, whether it's a patient, probably whether it's a academician or a researcher, is that if they see people that may look like them a little bit more, that helps recruit them into the potential of coming to OMRACT. So think about increasing the representativeness of the working group. Did I do okay?
Hi, I'm Lynn. I think, were we table 9? Over that corner, all right. Just building on the same theme to be more inclusive and a few strategies. We thought bursaries for the fellow or an emerging leader. Then we thought, well, they might come, but why would they come back? Because you won't be what you can't see. So if we're really going to do that, then you'd increase the number of continents that the working group lead should be, and specifically target the African and Asia Pacific regions that aren't there, but also make sure that the every level has a bursary. So the working group leader, emerging leader, and a fellow, so that they can come and they can be part of it, and they can see that they could stay to be part of it. And I guess the other key strategy that we came up with was improve the virtual experience, so that and reach out to specific targeted people and invite them to be part of the virtual experience, and also fund that, I guess, for some people who need that funding. More? Enough? Yeah? Covered? Okay. But that farmer would provide the bursaries, and that was given to us from our farmer stakeholder.
And just a quick reminder for those of you who are reporting back, if you can go hand your papers over to our scribe who's making our dope, awesome poster so that he can incorporate all of your ideas, that would be super great.
Hello, everybody. Laura Maxwell, and I'm from Table 4. So a couple of our ideas that it would be really good, as we are all about outcome measurement, to get an indication of how diverse OMRACT is right now. So we're thinking of some sort of anonymous survey we could put out there for people so we could get a baseline idea of how we're doing right now. And we also had talked about translating as well, and we mentioned the e-learning modules that are lovely and have lovely Caitlin's voice on it, but there's lots of people in this room that speak lots of different languages, and that we could look at getting those translated as well to increase accessibility to our resources. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jordi Pardo from Table 2. A lot of things that we have been talking has been said, but one of the things that came strong in our table was the fact that as an organization, we need to look at what are the systemic barriers to inclusion. And we talk about the diversity and so on, and we were saying, well, if in these countries there are few rheumatologists and they're really busy, so maybe we should target the patients, no? And then look for them first, and then we are not creating more inequity by removing busy rheumatologists from the different countries. And we can take a similar look at the financial barriers and language barriers that have already been said, but also an aspect, the fact to say, well, if you don't have an insider that is getting you into the secret club, how you get into OMERACT. So thinking how we can get ways that we can get more people insights without needing to get someone from the in to get in. That's my ideas.
Yeah, hi, I'm Casper, group number 10, I think. So I think most topics we had were already discussed now. We talked mainly about including not just, for example, people from different geographic locations, but also, for example, within groups, people of different socioeconomic status, different levels of health literacy, and not just in terms of the patient partners, but basically all the different roles are fulfilled within the group, so also the researchers, the group leaders, etc. And one of the ideas or things that we discuss is indeed like how to first, like main important would be to identify the barriers indeed to why do these people not join OMERACT? How can we identify who these people are? We didn't really have a solution for it, but we thought like maybe first start with awareness, just that this is an issue. So that was it.
Hi, I'm Paul Bird from Australia. I'm presenting on behalf of Table 5, Dibby from France, Nathan from France, Philip from the UK, Ezzy from the US, and Harmon from the US. We said things to work on world unity, so we want to make sure that we do include Asia-Pac, Africa, that's already been said. Wealthy versus non-wealthy. I don't know if you realise you've got to be rich to come to OMERACT. We've got to have a rich benefactor, so a lot of people from those countries aren't going to be able to come. We need to work on that. Engagement, make it more accessible. A lot of people in these countries, like Asia-Pac, are so time poor because they're flat out in clinics all day, they can't get away for a 5-day conference. Let them sign up for the couple of SIGs. Maybe we'll get them more involved. Relevance. There are different healthcare systems all around the world, and this is very US-centric. I'm sorry, I didn't say that. That came from the group. Make it relevant to the world. Understand the barriers better. So OMERACT, your mission, should you choose to accept it, this is our mission statement, identify the cultural, geographic and financial barriers and work on practical solutions. Reduce the fee for registration. SIG involvement only. Other languages other than English. Thanks.
I'm Max, and I'm reporting on behalf of Table 8. We also were discussing how to involve more participants from world regions that are not really represented here. And a lot of things have already been said. We also thought about different levels of registration fees. So participants from countries with, on average, lower income might have less of that barrier. And we thought of making outreach in form of delegations, maybe to specific rheumatology conferences of areas we would like to see more represented in our conferences. That was our ideas. Thank you.
I'm Ernest Choi from Table 6. So we did discuss funding support for attendees coming from Africa, Asian, and other countries, but we wasn't sure whether the figures that we showed was just about people who were physically here and didn't count the people who attended in hybrid. And of course, there is an issue that if they attend in hybrid, the system prevents them to engage fully in the meeting. That is another bias that we need to consider in the process. But we also take in Grace's challenge to us that we always need to evaluate. So we need to evaluate the membership, not only of the attendees, but all the working groups, the committees, the SIGs, as well as the technology advisory group to make sure that there is a gender equity and engagement of different ethnic groups. And one other idea that one of our members mentioned, which I like a lot because that's how we help to do COVID vaccination locally, which is to foster community champions to engage groups that are currently underrepresented.
I'm David from Table 15. I hope we're not being too bold here, but I think we come from we know that some of the outcome measures that we have in our specialty in the past have been biased against minoritized groups. For example, one example would be axial spondyloarthritis and some of the and what we've seen with some of the outcome measures that we've seen there and how that's affected development of therapy subsequently and then subsequently access to that. So that's a big thing to target, but whether at the first step we should be reporting the percentage in the way that we derive our outcome measures in terms of the patient groups that we capture, whether we should be reporting key EDI dimensions to make sure that we do aim towards having better representation from our patient partners. In terms of EDI dimensions. I think perhaps a little more we've got many suggestions here, but one thing that we could do, which is perhaps a little less bold, is some of those outreach tools that we're talking about today, whether we need to think about the different health literacy targets that we have for different, making sure that the materials we do produce do have some accessibility for patients of lower health literacy to make sure that we do get that bit broader representation, that we're not just representing patients of a high health literacy background in the measures that we do develop. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Lara, representing Table 7. We thought about who we were excluding by holding this meeting, OMRACT, in English only, and how we could potentially overcome this by using live translation earbuds, which are available at other conferences. And I guess this links to what Lara Maxwell was saying about to be able to appeal to people in the first place who don't speak English, having materials translated into other languages and the website available in other languages as well. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Rachel Gordon, and I'm representing Table 11. The disadvantage of going last is most of our ideas have already been articulated. So I may reframe our ideas slightly differently. So we did focus on geographical inclusion like many other groups. We do think it's important that the leadership of our working groups reflects diversity and what we want our working groups and what we want our research patient populations to look like. If we're not going to have an inclusive workforce if we don't see that at the level of leadership. The other piece of we specifically would like chairs to be included from Africa, and Asia on all working group committees, with the idea that this will not only shape what our working groups are going to look like, but also where we conduct our research and how we diversify our research programs. One specific action item as to where we can find leaders to assist in these efforts is through local rheumatologic organizations within those continents and countries. So we hope we'll be able to implement that. I just want to note a call to action that, you know, at our table, it was, our table made it apparent that when this conference was done virtually, global participation was more prominent, and we have an opportunity for the remainder of this conference to include our virtual participants. That's going to be a call to action for the Sjogren's group tomorrow, and I hope that we'll be able to do that for the rest of the meeting. Thank you.
All right, some awesome ideas. Fantastic. Again, just a reminder, if you were the scribe, note taker, all of that, please go take your ideas over to the poster scribe dude so that he can incorporate your ideas, okay?
So yes, I am going to stay in OMERACT and be the diversity of the equity group, because we have to. we can't lead if we don't have it sort of all the way through. So thank you for participating in what is sometimes a very uncomfortable conversation, but a very necessary conversation, and one that I'm thrilled to see got so much engagement and laughter and connectivity. That's always a very positive sign, because ultimately this is kind of where we want to go. We want to foster these connections. We want to broaden the reach. We want to be, you know, sort of the most liked thing on social media. Everyone wants to be a part of OMERACT. And we want OMERACT to actually reflect the people for whom it is representative, so that this is really the call to action. So thank you for participating in this. Thank you, Grayson, for walking us through this wonderful exercise of just figuring out who we are. It's taken me a couple of decades, but you really nailed it for me today, to think about all of the different things that become me, all of the different things that contributed to being me, as are all of you. So there is a QR code, which if true to form, the moment a QR code goes up, you're supposed to automatically hold up a phone, and if you are 25 or younger, and, and log right in. It is an amazing phenomenon, but that takes you right to the equity group. You're more than welcome to become a part of this. I think that if we want to transform what we do, we have to transform who we are, and we do this by being involved and being engaged and contributing all of the amazing ideas. So thank you for joining us in this session. And I think with that, I hand it to Lara so that we can say finito. I'm going to say something not in English.
I just wanted to thank you, Grace. And I think we can all give Grace a fantastic big round of applause for leading us through this session.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And as she said, the amount of energy and conversation in this room was really fantastic to see. And we, as Nita noted, we do want you to join the working group. That's why that big QR code is up there. We recognize that we need you. We need your help in helping us develop a mission statement, an EDI mission statement for how we want to move forward. We want to make sure we're held accountable to make that the principles that we outline in that mission statement. We need to bring those people together to improve our creativity of diverse voices and varied perspectives. So, please do join us. We'll be holding monthly working group calls once we have our working group all set up. And thank you again for participating in this session. Thank you to Grayson and Grace.